Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher stands as a pinnacle of Gothic literature, combining themes of decay, madness, and the supernatural. This haunting tale explores the fragile boundary between reality and nightmare, as the fate of a family becomes inextricably linked to the crumbling walls of their ancestral home. On a bleak and soundless autumn day, our unnamed narrator arrives at the House of Usher, a mansion that exudes an atmosphere of insufferable gloom. This structure, with its decaying walls and vacant, eye-like windows, casts a strange influence over him, filling him with inexplicable dread. As he rides closer, the reflection of the house in the dark, still waters of the nearby tarn deepens his foreboding. The narrator has come at the urgent request of his childhood friend, Roderick Usher, who claims to suffer from a mysterious illness and begs for companionship in his distress. Upon entering the mansion, it becomes immediately clear that the house and its inhabitants share a deep, almost supernatural connection. The gloomy interior, filled with ancient furnishings, dimly lit rooms, and thick tapestries, mirrors the mental state of its owner. Roderick Usher, once a bright and lively figure in the narrator's youth, is now a shadow of his former self. His face is pale, his eyes unnervingly luminous, and his movements are marked by nervous agitation. He confesses to suffering from a family malady that has heightened his senses to an unbearable degree. He is tormented by the faintest light, sound, or smell. His mind is likewise disturbed, gripped by strange and fearful beliefs about the house and its surroundings. Usher is not alone in the house. His twin sister, Madeline, also suffers from a grave illness, one that has left her in a state of wasting away, subject to bouts of catalepsy, a condition where she becomes rigid and unresponsive, appearing almost as if dead. The presence of Madeline is unsettling to the narrator. She moves through the house silently, barely acknowledging his existence, adding to the air of dread. For days, the narrator tries to distract Roderick from his growing obsession with the house and his sister's illness. They spend their time painting, reading, and playing music, yet nothing seems to lift Roderick's spirits. The narrator begins to suspect that the house itself may be influencing his friend's descent into madness. Roderick shares his belief that the house, the surrounding vegetation, and even inanimate objects possess some form of intelligence, feeding off the Usher family's decline. The situation takes a darker turn when Madeline Usher succumbs to her illness. Roderick, devastated by her death, insists on entombing her body in the family vault beneath the house for fear that grave robbers might disturb her. The narrator assists him in this grim task. As they place her in the coffin, the narrator notes with a shudder the striking resemblance between the twins, both in appearance and in the strange bond that seems to unite them. After Madeline's burial, Roderick's condition worsens dramatically. He becomes more withdrawn and erratic, and the narrator begins to feel the oppressive influence of the house more acutely. The atmosphere inside the mansion becomes unbearable, every shadow, every sound seems charged with menace. One night, during a particularly violent storm, the narrator finds himself unable to sleep. Strange sounds echo through the house, and a sense of impending doom grips him. Suddenly, Roderick bursts into his room, wild-eyed and trembling. He is convinced that they have made a terrible mistake, that Madeline was buried alive. The strange sounds that have haunted the house, he claims, are her desperate attempts to escape from the tomb. In an effort to calm Roderick, the narrator begins to read aloud from a medieval romance. However, as he reads, the sounds in the story, the creaking of doors, the clashing of metal, are eerily mirrored by real noises coming from within the house. The narrator tries to dismiss this as coincidence, but his unease grows with each passing moment. At the story's climax, the sounds become unmistakable: footsteps, groaning hinges, and finally, a loud, metallic clang. Roderick, now utterly frantic, reveals the horrifying truth: they have indeed buried Madeline alive, and she has returned to confront them. At that moment, the door to the room bursts open, and Madeline Usher, bloodied and emaciated, stands before them, having clawed her way out of the vault. She collapses onto her brother, and in her final death throes, she drags him down with her. Roderick dies, consumed by fear and guilt. In a state of terror, the narrator flees from the house. As he looks back, he sees the mansion, now illuminated by the blood-red moon, split apart. The crack in the structure, which had previously been barely visible, widens rapidly, and with a deafening roar, the House of Usher collapses into the Tarn, disappearing beneath the dark waters. The house, the family, and their legacy are gone, leaving no trace behind. Now, let's review the key characters. Roderick Usher, a deeply troubled man whose physical and mental deterioration is closely linked to the decaying mansion. His acute sensitivity to sensory input reflects his fragile psychological state, and his eventual collapse parallels that of the house itself. Madeline Usher, Roderick's twin sister, whose illness and cataleptic fits symbolize the decay of the Usher family. She exists in a liminal space between life and death, and her premature burial leads to the story's horrifying climax. The narrator, a childhood friend of Roderick's, the unnamed narrator serves as an outsider who bears witness to the bizarre events that unfold within the House of Usher. His growing sense of dread mirrors that of the reader, as he becomes increasingly drawn into the supernatural atmosphere of the mansion. Poe's story is rich with symbols, many of which revolve around the House of Usher itself. The mansion stands as a symbol of the Usher family's decline. Its decaying structure reflects the physical and mental deterioration of its inhabitants, and its ultimate collapse represents the end of the family line. The fissure in the house, which widens at the story's end, can be seen as a metaphor for the fracture within Roderick's mind, as well as the breaking of the bond between the twins. Another key symbol is Madeline's entombment. The act of burying her alive serves as a physical representation of the repressed fears and anxieties that haunt Roderick. When she escapes from the tomb, it is not just Madeline's body that returns, but all the unresolved emotions and fears that Roderick has tried to bury. The weather also plays an important symbolic role. The storm that rages during the climax of the story mirrors the emotional turbulence inside the house. Poe uses the environment to heighten the sense of doom and reflect the characters' inner turmoil. Themes such as sanity versus insanity, fear, and the supernatural are central to the story. Roderick's descent into madness, driven by his fear of death and his belief in the sentience of the house, blurs the line between reality and the supernatural. The narrator, too, becomes caught in this web of fear, unsure of what is real and what is imagined. In The Fall of the House of Usher, Poe masterfully blends psychological horror with Gothic elements to create a tale that lingers in the reader's mind long after the final collapse of the house. The story's exploration of fear, madness, and the supernatural makes it one of the most enduring works of Gothic fiction. The house, like its inhabitants, is both a symbol and a participant in the narrative, making this story a haunting study of the connections between place, mind, and family. Thank you for joining us in exploring Edgar Allan Poe's chilling masterpiece. Be sure to stay tuned for more in-depth analyses of classic literature.